Hello and welcome to our workshop, Introduction to Nonviolent Communication, facilitated by Rachelle Lamb. We are honored to have you joining us today and grateful to you for supporting the Moose Hide campaign. My name is Aaliyah Darcy and I'm grateful to be supporting this session today. I am joining you all from the traditional unceded territory of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam First Nations, also known as Vancouver. As we are all participating today from different parts of Turtle Island, I encourage you to take some time to familiarize yourself with which traditional territory you are residing on, and include that knowledge and learning in your space as we ground ourselves in ceremony. So during today's session, I'll go over a few housekeeping notes before we begin. So everybody's mics are going to remain muted and the general chat function is open. We encourage you to engage in conversation in that way. And if you have any questions, you can put those in the chat and I will bring your questions forward to Rachelle. We will do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can before the end of the workshop. It is also very important that everybody in this call be treated kindly and act respectfully. This is an invitation to embody our values of love, wisdom, trust, and respect. If anybody is in need of assistance at any time during the session, you can message me directly through the Zoom chat and I'll be happy to support you. You can also visit our events Microsites Wellness Center for a list of support resources, and I'll be popping a link to that in the chat momentarily. And I also just want to give you a friendly reminder that this session is being recorded. So without further ado, it is now my pleasure to introduce you to Rachelle Lamb. Rachelle is a recognized speaker, relationship coach, and nonviolent communication trainer. She brings an earthy, practical, yet innovative wisdom to her work, curated over decades of studying drawing from cultural anthropology, psychology, history, mythology, poetry, storytelling, and deep ecology. Her synthesis of these disciplines provides a rich and fertile scaffolding for transformational dialogue and consistently produces powerful learning experiences for individuals and audiences who cite the learning as profound and life-changing. So thank you so much, Rachelle, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much for that introduction. As I'm listening to you describe who I am, I'm wondering, is that how most people see me? But anyway, I'm grateful for the generous words, and I am looking out my window, my backyard window right now, into a Gary Oak meadow, and the camas are coming up. So it's this vivid green with these beautiful purple bursts of color that are there. And I am on the unceded territory of the Lekwungen peoples and Coast Salish. My mailing address is Victoria, but I prefer the former. So thank you so much for giving your time so generously to attend this. I have been doing this work for over 20 years now, specifically focusing on nonviolent communication that is a particular process developed by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, who is no longer living, but his work is being carried by those who found something very worthwhile and valuable in what he was trying to share with his audiences. And I am one of those people who remain committed to sharing this work, because one thing I've seen is that people, no matter how good-willed, good-hearted, open, and kind they are, when they're with other human beings, boy, it sure can get messy quickly. And I'm guessing that everyone here has some familiarity with that. And so I have very little time to share something with you that I've devoted so much time to learning. And ordinarily in many of my workshops, it'll be at least 2 days that I would recommend. So let's see what we can accomplish in a very short period of time. And there is a handout that's been made available to you, and I believe that's been already posted. And so you can download that if you wish. So basically, we're looking at, in this particular model or process framework, is like, what is it that supports people in being compassionate, being in alignment with their true nature, which the belief is in the nonviolent communication and many faiths around the world is that what gives people, human beings, the greatest joy is to be able to contribute to life, to be in service to life. So that is what NVC is trying to do. And there's two components to, at least when I'm teaching it, is to look at what is it that gets in the way? How have we been educated? Because Marshall Rosenberg would have said, well, we've been educated to enjoy violence. And this is something that we're exposed to at a very young age, typically through entertainment, but also through our families. And people who are, despite trying to do the best they can, will use language in a particular way that is alienating to ourselves and to other people. And I can give you a quick example, is that if somebody saw me maybe taking more than what we would consider my fair share of desserts at a table, the way of educating me would probably be to say something like, hey, you're not thinking about other people, stop being so selfish. And the impact of that very often on a human being is alienating. And so we start to feel shameful about who we are, or we push back and we develop a sense of entitlement is often what will happen. So a more life-serving approach would be to say something like, hey, there's a need here for us to be attentive to everybody here. And so before you take the last piece of cake, how about you ask others if they would like it? Because there's some people here who haven't had any yet. So there's a kindness in that. It's an invitation as opposed to a demand. So nonviolent communication recognizes the ways in which we have been educated in an alienating way of thinking. And, when things are well, we're not typically thinking in those ways, but when things are not well, that is usually when it kicks in. So one of the things I really appreciated about nonviolent communication is that it provides not only the template for how to connect, but the template for how to disconnect, because that's usually the one that's in operation when we are in the midst of rising interpersonal tensions. So now in that handout, you can look at the handout or not. It's not necessary for you to look at it, but and actually maybe what I'll do is I'll screen share it right now. Hang on a second. Technology is not my favorite thing. Okay, here we go. Share.
Rachelle, I already shared the handouts in the chat.
Okay, and I'm going to just put it up here in case people don't want to bother opening it.
Okay.
All right, here we go. So yeah, it's called A Recipe for Alienation. So we're thinking in terms of when we see people doing things that we don't like. The first thing we do is we diagnose. So this is language that implies rightness and wrongness. So there's a way of thinking. It's good, bad, right, wrong, appropriate, inappropriate, normal, abnormal, manipulative, controlling, stupid, loser, racist, all the should thinking, you always, you never. So when that is happening, it becomes incredibly adversarial for people. The only choice you have is to submit or rebel, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But that's typically what happens. It cancels the goodwill that is naturally flowing between people, because given the choice between doing things together in a good way, even if we don't like the task at hand, when we're doing things together in a good way, we achieve more and we're more relational with each other and with the task that we're trying to achieve. But the second we have this resistance that comes up. It makes it difficult for us to work together, and you have resentment and rebellion, and this is what's going on. So that's the first one, is this diagnosis. And there's no gray in this. It's you're either good or you're bad. There's no nuance, there's no gray. The second one is demands. You need some water. So, oh, there's a little hummingbird that just is feeding out there now. The hummingbird knows how to do all this. Okay, so demands. This is language that minimizes choice and respect for other people's autonomy. So do as I say, you must, you have to. And these words typically will erode goodwill and provoke resentment. And excuse me, this is especially important when people have positional power. And all of us at some point do have positional power. You could be a parent, you could be a teacher, you can be an instructor of some sort. You could be a politician, a boss. Even between couples, in a couple's relationship, that kind of who gets to make the choices about how we spend money, or where the kids go to school, or what restaurant we're going to, or who's going to cook, who's going to clean the house. The power element is coming in. And in nonviolent communication, we want to be power with each other, because that brings up, that makes the goodwill flourishes in that environment. So demands moves you into the power under, power over position. The third one is denial of personal responsibility. And this is language that denies responsibility and choice with respect to actions taken. And this language is disempowering and promotes victim mentality. I haven't been speaking much this morning, so I can feel it in my throat. So here's an example of this. I have to, the boss said so. It's company policy. I'm just following orders. It's just the way it is. I have no choice. Can you see how that language puts you in the victim position? And it means that other people, the government, whatever, has power over you. Now, I'm not here to say that there isn't such a thing as a certain power structure that has us feeling quite victimized. In fact, this is happening. And yet we want to recognize the areas in which we do have agency. And here's one: no matter what is happening, I always have the power to choose my response. And in that sense, I'm not a victim. So this is very important to recognize this. And there's another way in which we also deny personal responsibility, and it's the way we speak about our feelings. If I say, for example, to my child, you make me so angry when you do this. To my partner, you make me feel rejected or unimportant. This type of language does not inspire others to give us what we're most yearning for in those moments. It's armored, it's blaming, and it interferes with our ability to collaborate. And the last one here is deserve thinking. And this is language associated with the concept that certain actions merit reward or punishment. And this language motivates extrinsically instead of intrinsically. We need to ask ourselves a very important reason, and that we need to ask ourselves a very important question. And that question is, what do I want the other person's reasons to be for doing what I ask, for modifying their behavior? I don't want them to do it because they're afraid of what will be taken away from them, because they'll be punished. No, I want them to do it because they can see how it's life-serving. That's intrinsic, as opposed to the external. So we do want people to be motivated intrinsically. And it takes time to teach it. But it's essentially, it's life-serving to proceed in that way. Now, Here's what happens when this is the way I am engaging with others. The choice that people have is to submit or rebel. You see how it moves people out of the goodwill and straight into this. And that's not how I want to live my life. Most people do not want to live their life in that way. Now, Marshall Rosenberg had written a poem. He used to write a few things that's in his book, Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life. And the poem was inspired by an interaction he had with his son, who at the time was 16 years old. And some of you might recognize this dynamic. So his son's name is Brett, and this particular piece is called Song from Brett. If I clearly understand you intend no demand, I'll usually respond when you call. But when you come across as a high and mighty boss, you'll feel like you ran into a wall. And when you remind me so piously about all the things you've done for me, you better get ready. Here comes another bout. Then you can shout, you can spit, moan, groan, and throw a fit. I still won't take the garbage out. Now, even if you should change your style, it's going to take me a little while to forgive and forget, because it seems to me that you didn't see me as human too until all your standards were met. I think that's such a beautiful piece. It's a hard one, but the reason I appreciate it, because it just so vividly illustrates what happens between people. This is between people who love each other. If this is what happens between people who love each other, then you can just imagine what happens between those who don't. And the way that, these very punitive ways of being with each other. And yet it's so not what delights us. It's not what we're here for. It's not in service to life. And I think most of us can recognize having been on the receiving end of that particular dynamic and on the giving end of that dynamic. So it's a beautiful illustration of that.
Rachelle, sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it. It's perfect time. I was about to ask you.
Great. There's a request for the name of the poem. So I just wanted to address that before we move further so that person can have it.
Yeah, it's called Song from Brett.
Awesome.
And if you go on my website or just on YouTube, because I've recited it, I've recited a few times. So if you do Song from Brett and my name, it'll pop up and you'll have it. Yeah, it is in the book, Nonviolent Communication. Yeah. I'm glad you want it. It's very powerful. Okay. Are there any questions that are coming up? I don't see the chat right now. I'm just wondering if there's anything. Okay, I'm going to guess not.
There's no more questions.
Okay, perfect. Super. So here are the 4 steps of the NVC process. And when we follow this process, we are much more likely to facilitate goodwill and connection. And here's the other thing, is that the likelihood of violence diminishes greatly. And this is so important. And we want to be minimizing that. There's a tendency for things to escalate when people are upset with each other. What we're trying to do is de-escalate. Let's come back to planet Earth, where we can actually speak to each other in a good way. So there are 4 very simple steps to follow, and this is very hard to do. And it's hard to do because of what I just showed you. So the way I like to present is to say to people, look, the way we disconnect from each other, assume that this is operational, especially in times of interpersonal tension. Just assume that this is happening, because then that gives you some way to disengage from it. Because if all you do is apply these 4 steps on top of your current way of thinking about things, let's just say you do think somebody deserves to be punished, and then you apply this process, you're still in an alienating mindset where this becomes a kind of a manipulation instead of what it's really intended to do is to help us connect from the heart. Just recognize, oh, life is hard. Boy, this is hard. Super hard. And let's just see if we can find a way to address the needs that need attention right now and come away feeling good. Let's see if we can do that. So the first step is to make clear observations about what we see. So something's happening, we don't like what it is, it's important to be able to name it. Now, here's the tricky thing. Often in the naming, we might not be aware of it, but we can be very evaluative instead of just stating the observation. So I say, I see you taking the last piece of cake without checking with others. That's an observation. There you go again, not thinking about other people, being selfish. That's an evaluation. Can you see the difference between the two? I'm hoping you can. So you go with the fact because people won't argue with facts. Okay, now I just want to say something about what I just said. People won't argue with facts. Apparently, that's no longer true. We're living in a time now where facts don't seem to matter much, and I don't know what to do about that. But as much as possible, we want to be able to name things that are observable, can be recorded with a camera, or an audio. It could be your opinion that gravity is fiction, but in the world, you can ask somebody to, okay, jump off of that building over there and let's see, does your opinion matter so much? It doesn't matter because gravity is going to have its way with you anyway. So this is why facts are really important, but we don't want to use facts to build cases. It's the facts so that we can find a way to reconnect to life. That's why we're doing it. So observations are factual, non-evaluative. They imply no rightness or wrongness, and they're simple points of reference within the communication exchange. And it will often be the starting point of a dialogue. So this part is a very difficult part for us to wrestle with because it's so easy to think, well, what that person is doing is wrong. I'm not here to say there's no such thing as right and wrong. But I think the languaging of it can be put us in a kinder landscape. It's really about whether or not this serves life. Is it serving life to do this? So that's where the right and wrong goes, because I'm not here making any case for do whatever you want. It's a free world, do whatever you want. That's not what I'm talking about, because that's a harmful way of thinking. That's not life-serving. Yeah, there are compromises that we need to make by virtue of just living in a mortal physical body and living in a physical world. So that's the first one, the observation. The second one is to state our feelings. And feelings arise as a result of how we interpret our needs being met or not being met. And it's important to make the distinction between thoughts and feelings while also recognizing that they often significantly impact one another. I am going to do a small exercise with you on this particular piece, feelings. The third one is needs. Every single thing that we say and do is motivated by an attempt to fulfill our needs. And NVC defines needs as universal, as positive, and unifying. There isn't a need that I have that you don't have. There isn't a need that you have that I don't have. As long as we're talking about the same meaning of what is a need. And in the handouts, one of the handouts is a list of feelings and needs. Now, if we had a two-day workshop here, one of the exercises I would give you is you would break out into small groups and I would have you generate a list of needs before I give you this list of needs. And here's what happens. Within 30 minutes, we have these flip chart pieces up on the wall. And when you stand back and look at them, they all are very similar. And it doesn't matter where you go in the world, you'll often see the same things. What are those needs? Things like love, care, attention, connection, understanding, empathy, compassion, meaning, purpose, trust. All that's the language that you see coming up on those lists. So you have that list. It's a pretty extensive one, about 60 to 70 words on there. And one of the things that I love so much about this is they are positive words. When we're having interpersonal tension, it's usually going into the area of what's wrong with me, what's wrong with you, and we're going to battle it out. And it has the negative tone to it. Whereas when you bring in the needs are positive and they're unifying because, as I said, we all have similar needs. Different needs might be arising at different times, but the needs are the same. I would never say, well, we have different needs. Not when we're talking about the NVC definition of needs, which is life-serving. So, you know, I'm thinking about the need for sustenance. Everyone has a need for sustenance, but you don't need, it doesn't have to be a burger. It doesn't have to be fries. It doesn't have to be pizza. It needs to be sustenance, though. So that's called mixing needs and strategies. Pizza is a strategy to meet your need for sustenance or enjoyment, pleasure, So recognizing that, we really want to draw people's attention to what needs are you attempting to meet right now by doing what you're doing. The last one is requests. And NVC requests is you ask for something, are clear, they're specific, and they're doable. And we choose words that clearly point to what we want and not to what we don't want. And we avoid language that's vague, denies the other person's autonomy. A request is only truly a request if we welcome a no as much as a yes. In NVC, we're taught to not hear no. That doesn't mean to not respect it. What we hear in every no, there's also a yes, not to what we've asked for, but what the person is saying yes to. For instance, no, I cannot spend time with you this evening. Where's the yes in that? The yes is to the prior commitment that I have, or it could be the yes is to my need for rest right now. I am so tired. And so, yes, I value our connection. And what is really pressing right now is my need for rest is I'm prioritizing it. That's what's happening. So it's much easier to receive the no when you can hear the yes. And when I say receive the no, to not interpret it as rejection, because humans don't like rejection. We don't like to be rejected. So much easier to understand why is the person saying no. And we can have that conversation. So these are the 4 steps. As I said, it's simple as you see it, and it's very difficult to execute it at times, especially when we have history with somebody. You have history with somebody, there's a familiar dance that we get into, and even when it's not a good dance, it's familiar to us. And this would be a good time for me to speak about your amygdala right now. So this is the small almond-shaped organ in our brain that is constantly just monitoring the environment, like for safety. Am I safe? And when we have the fight, flight, or freeze response, you want to track that, because when our bodies are activated that way, and we are in the threat response, really important to pay attention to what's going on to your body, the physiology of your body, because in those moments, our blood is actually being recirculated throughout the body, and it goes directly to our extremities. So to our legs, to our feet, to our hands and arms. Why is it doing that? Because under a threat, it's important to be able to move fast if you need to protect yourself. Get out of there. If it's to fight, by the way, nonviolent communication talks about protective use of force. Sometimes you would use protective use of force. When would you do that? You would do it if you have a friend over who's had more than the allowable amount of alcohol to drink, and they're leaving with their car keys. If you take their car keys, it could be said that now you're not respecting their need for autonomy, but what you're doing, you care for your dear friend and you know it's not safe for them to drive. So to prohibit them from driving is protective use of force.
Rochelle, we have
Yes.
a couple questions in the chat.
Okay, let's go to that and I'll stop the share here. Okay.
Okay, so the first question is, doesn't I see you taking the last piece of cake without checking with others an assumption, and implying wrongness? I see taking the last piece of cake seems to be a factual, non-evaluative observation.
Yeah. It's going to depend really on your tone. And I'm saying it's a fact if it's a fact. It might not be a fact. So let's say that you're going to move ahead with this by making sure it's a fact. So does it imply wrongness? Here's what it implies. It's implying that not everyone's needs are being met or being factored into the calculation about taking the cake. That is the assumption. So I would go with that assumption. Is it wrong? No, it's not wrong to take the last piece of cake without checking with others. It's not a wrong thing to do. I've always appreciated one of Marshall's quotes. He said, I've never done anything wrong and I never will. I have done things in the past that I would not have done if I had known then what I have since learned. So some human beings, just based on experience, based on age, when you have time in and someone else is pretty new to the world and new to the social scene, there is some instruction, there is some education, some guidance that's required. So it's your manner of doing it. Hey, there's other people in the room. Now, it depends on what age the person is, too. So I don't know. Have I answered the question sufficiently, or or whoever asked it, if they want to chime in or ask more about it, I'm happy to do that.
Sure. I don't know if audience members, are you able to unmute yourself? Could you let me know in the chat if you are? Or the person who asked that question, Caitlin, you can unmute yourself, but if not, I can help you do that. And while you guys are doing that, we have another question from Sasha. Sasha is curious about how to have the conversation of curiosity when someone says no.
Yeah. Now, of course, it depends on what's the no, what's being asked, but you keep going in the conversation. Sasha, are you able to unmute yourself and give me an example? Like no to what?
Hi
I
there.
can make something up too.
Hi.
How about asking someone to do the dishes in the house? Okay, you've got a teenager and you're asking that person to do the dishes. Hey, can you help out and do the dishes? No, I don't. No, I don't feel like it. That's the response you get. Okay, there you go. How are you going to engage with that? And it might be something like, okay, yeah, I hear. Can I just ask you what's preventing you from saying yes? I just don't feel like it. I'm busy. I got other stuff to do. I want to go play a game. I want to go hang out with my friends. Okay, so you have this need to connect with other friends and also need for spontaneity and to make your own choices about stuff. Yeah. Okay. Now I can keep going with this and I will, just for the sake of seeing what's possible here. Sometimes I have to decide whether or not I want to continue with the conversation, but I'm going to assume in this case I do. I can so appreciate that you want to do that. Here's the thing I'm struggling with. We all share a meal together and we all share this home together. It's been a while. It's been a couple of weeks since you last did the dishes, and it would really meet my need for contribution and support in something that we all benefit from. And I'm wondering what it's like for you to hear that. Huh? What are you talking about? Oh, did you take a stupid workshop or something like that? Why are you talking so weird? Yeah, I guess I am. I am speaking differently, but it's to me, it's an important thing to consider this that we all contribute, especially when we're able to. I'm curious to know what you're hearing me say right now. Yeah, you want me to do the dishes. Is true. Yes, I do want you to do the dishes, but there's something more important that I'm wanting you to hear. I'm wanting you to hear my heart's desire that we all recognize that it's important for us to contribute to helping this household run. What are you hearing now? Oh gosh. You want, yeah, you want contribution. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. That is it. Okay, you see what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get some engagement. And how can I ask you to do something without it coming across as a demand when it's so important for people to learn how to contribute to each other's well-being and survival and living together? Okay, so there is some education going on here. It'd be a very different conversation if I'm talking to my spouse. It'll have the same qualities, the same, I have a need for equality or some sense of partnership, you know? So,
Thank you.
okay,
Okay.
Sasha, you got that? Thank you. That's helpful. Good. Thank you for asking. It's a good question.
Sasha, did you want to add anything? I figured out how to help people unmute as well, and they're able to unmute themselves. So
Great.
Thank you. That's helpful. And just, yeah, in the context of intimate relationships, when you're negotiating expectations and trying to meet in the middle and being able to communicate around and negotiate almost around someone's needs that you may not feel you can, meet 100%. So just the curiosity around how to, I guess, the negotiation of that in a way that keeps it curious and collaborative. And I think you did a good job of demonstrating that in that conversation.
Okay. I will just add to this is that, it is a bit different when we're talking about couples. And yeah, it's negotiation throughout the entire relationship. That's part of it. It's just how do we live together? How do we accomplish things together? How do we buy a home together, save up, live together, get places, care for children if you have children, care for elders? One of the things that's important to recognize is how are we proceeding? Where's the need coming from? Is it coming from a part of us that has been hurt? Is where there's trauma, where there's, none of us have had our childhood needs entirely met. And I'm not here to suggest that they ought to be all the time, but I do think that there's a level of childhood trauma that exceeds what one would call desirable. Okay, it's much stronger than that, and this gets carried forward, especially in intimate relationships. You've heard this. So you marry your mother, you marry your father. That's not entirely true, but you marry the pattern that you learned during your childhood, and it gets projected onto another person. So it's important to do is to recognize, is this my childhood need, or am I actually behaving like a grown-up here? Because, hey, let's face it, if you marry somebody and they pick up after you, do things for you the way maybe your mom did, or the way you wanted your mom to do, that is not an equal or a balanced relationship. And so what I want to do when I'm working with couples is to help them move into two grown-ups having a negotiation. That works way better than two people, and one of them is in the grown-up position, and the other one is in the childhood position, despite the fact that they're actually living in a grown-up body. Okay, so it's just, we need to recognize that this is also a dynamic that happens. Yeah. That's why you hear the term, could you grow up? Or so many people saying, women in particular will say, oh, I feel like, I've given birth to 3 kids, but I feel like I have 4 with my partner. So that's very familiar to many people, and doesn't always have to be the, male, female, whatever the dynamic is, it doesn't matter what the kind of relationship is. Yeah.
Rachelle, we have
Yes.
several more questions. I was
Okay.
wondering if you wanted to dive into those, or if you have more you'd like to present, and then we can come back to the questions.
Let's hear one more question. And then I'm going to go into the feeling exercise, because that's one thing I really want you to leave with, is the clear understanding of that, because I think it will make a big difference for you. And I'm thinking, what can I do for them in an hour and 15 minutes that will make a significant difference? Okay, so what question?
We have a follow-up question from Sasha about resources that support 2 grown-up conversations. So maybe you could address that quickly, and then we can do one question from someone else. And then,
yeah, I mean, resources, I'm just going to send you to my website, and you can look under services for couples. I have resources for couples, because NVC is the framework I use for conflict resolution. And yet, when it comes to working with couples, there's all these other dynamics that are occurring. And so I am drawing from other teachers as well in that. And so I do have that listed there. Yeah.
thank you, Rachelle.
Okay, you're welcome.
The next question we have is, how to use nonviolent communication when you have to say no professionally, and how to react when you say no respectfully, but the other person insists using the same arguments.
Okay, this is high risk stuff, okay? Because it depends on how much do you want to stay in that job. I just always think it's a good idea to entertain the possibility that you're not in the right place, that this is not where you want to spend the rest of your, I don't know how many years doing this particular work. But let's imagine this. Hey, is the person who's asked the question willing to just give me a little bit more information, or come on so I could speak to them?
Hi, that's me. It's Marina. Hi.
Okay, Marina, what
Yes.
is, give me a very quick snapshot.
Really, really snapshot. Sometimes you
Yeah.
need to provide a service and you can't, just because there is no grounds there, and you have to say no to this person.
Yeah.
And the person keeps insisting on repeating the same argument, and the talk that's supposed to last 15 minutes takes an hour, because
Okay.
the person doesn't hear the no.
Okay, and this person is a client, a superior,
Yes.
a client. Okay.
A client.
Okay, so here's what NVC is. There's 2 things happening: honesty, empathy. I'm going to share what's alive in me, and I'm also going to connect with what's alive in you. When I'm connecting with what's alive in you, it's empathy. Like in this moment, I could say, I'm hearing what a struggle it is for you when you're working with a client and you have a need for ease and harmony between you, and also for some shared understanding. Yeah. Okay. So that's it. Me connecting with what's going on for you in this moment. So you say to this person, wow, I'm hearing how important this is for you to have. And the other thing I'm hearing is that you're under the impression that I can provide it. Am I hearing you correctly? And they say yes. I say, well, how is it for you to hear me say I'm actually not in a position to provide it? I would love to, and my hands are tied. Do you want to continue with our conversation? Or what? I'm actually not going to say that last piece. There's a part of me that's like wanting to say it, but it depends. And I would say that was somebody who I knew, like, where are we going with this? But it is, so what would you like? Is there anything you'd like back from me right now that I actually am able to provide? That's how I would approach it. And then see where you go with that. Remember, you hold on to just hold on to the power of the needs inside of yourself. You are wanting to support somebody, but it's really hard when they're coming after you, asking for something you can't give. I don't have it. So yeah. And
Thank you so much.
you can mourn with them, mourning and celebration, Yeah, I get that it's rough that I'm not the one to give it to you. I get it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachelle.
You're welcome. Okay. Okay, I'm going to move into the feelings piece, and that brings me to the screen share again. Now, is that it? There it is. Okay. This is it right here. Exercise. A closer look at feelings. So, how many people can we do a breakout? I'm wondering, I wasn't going to, but I'm just wondering if we could do a breakout for 5 minutes. Is that possible? If it's not, we're gonna just keep going.
We can. I could set that up, but there's 154 people here.
Let's not. Okay, forget it. We're not going to do it. I'll do it another way. Plan B. You can use your chat for this. So you look at this. There's 2 lists, list A and list B, and you can see that the words are different. And here are the questions. How do the above 2 lists differ from each other? And how would the use of these words impact a conversation? Now, the word feeling is often used for list A and also for list B. I feel excited. I feel disrespected. I feel anxious. I feel manipulated. Okay, you can see that you'll often hear the word feeling. Here's my question to you. What is the difference? And if anybody has any idea, please put it in the chat. Okay. I'm going to see if I can read this quickly. List B had accusation. I'm going to go back. Oh, okay. Torvin writes, list A is what you feel. List B assumes the intent of the other person. Bingo. Yeah. So you are interpreting another person's actions. So if I say, I feel disrespected, what I'm doing is telling you how I evaluate what you're doing to me. I am actually not telling you how I feel. Even though I use the word, I feel disrespected, I'm not really telling you how I feel. Now, I know I acknowledge that this can be confusing initially, but here I'm going to do a little bit of acting for you right now. I'm going to say I feel disrespected twice, and I think you're going to notice the difference. I'm going to yell, okay? Just letting you know. So, I feel disrespected, really disrespected. Here's the second one. I feel disrespected. Do you see the difference? I did not tell you how I felt. I told you how I interpreted your or somebody else's actions. Could be your actions or somebody else, okay? But in the first instance, I feel angry. And I would say in both of them, I feel hurt. But this is the feeling that I feel really angry because I have a need for respect. And I'm telling myself that you're not meeting it. Okay. That's a clean and responsible way to say it. So what we're trying to do here is be grown-ups, be accountable. As soon as you say, I feel disrespected to someone and you're aiming it at that person, there's a good chance they are going to fight back. They'll resist. And what you have there is 2 people now racing for the victim position. If I feel disrespected, I'm a victim of your disrespect, and that person will say, well, they're a victim of my evaluation. And this is how things escalate in a negative way really quickly. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. I've given you a list of feelings and needs, and at the bottom, it's given you of one of the sheets, feelings when we don't enjoy what's happening. There's a box, and it says this is really important. The following words are often confused as feelings, when in fact, they're interpretations or assessments of other people's actions. So list B is all of that, but guess what? It's a very long list. There's a lot of words on that, and here's what I suggest people do. This is the big takeaway that I'm offering you. Study that list and notice, circle the ones you use a lot. And for the people who you're closest to, use a different color pen and circle the words they use when they're talking to you. Like if you've got a teenager who says, I feel controlled, you can have a spouse who says the same thing too. I feel controlled. That the control is they're telling you this is how you're coming across to them, or this is how they're interpreting it, okay? There's what you're doing, there's their history, your history, and it comes together and it creates a kind of a mess is what happens. And we're trying to clarify all that, get really clear on what is it that's actually occurring between us. So, and here's the other thing is I encourage people to study these words and decide not to use them, because it forces you, when you're talking about your feelings, talk about your feelings. And you know what? This requires a lot of courage and vulnerability to do that. It's scary to speak about how I feel. I feel hurt. I have a need for consideration. I have a need for respect. Whatever it is, you're better to say that. And it's good to practice it. Just practice saying it out loud, even, if you're, while you're doing tasks around the house, practice saying these things. And then when the moment comes, when there is real tension, it will be more readily available to you. If you wait till the last moment, you're usually going into habit. And what's the habit? Well, you always, you never, whatever it is. The other thing I encourage you to do is to take that list of feelings and needs, print off several copies of it, put it on the fridge, put it in places that are visible to you, bring it into the classroom, make a large copy of it, which you can do that, just expand the size.
On the note of making it visible, we do have some folks who are visually impaired, and there's a request for you to read out list A and list B so they know everything.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, here's list A. And I'll just add one more thing because it'll make what I'm about to say more concrete. If you can draw an emoji for the word, you can trust it's a feeling. But I cannot draw an emoji for disrespected. I can draw an emoji for excited, okay? So list A is excited, anxious, discouraged, afraid, angry, sad, surprised, frustrated. And there's more feelings, which is on the feelings and needs list that you have, okay? So that's available to you. List B, which are evaluations, and it's thoughts, it's thinking. Disrespected, manipulated, betrayed, unappreciated, abandoned, judged, ignored, unloved. All of those words are evaluations. Now, for any of you who might be in a helping profession and you want to be able to affirm another person, here's what I encourage people to do. Affirm the need, but not the story. Someone says to you, I feel unloved. I don't recommend you saying, so you feel unloved. Ow. Okay, this maybe sounds kind. I would prefer to say, your need for love isn't being met right now in the way that you can recognize or really take in. And It sounds like you're feeling really alone and hurt. That's the feeling. And then, you have many directions you can go. Let's talk about, have there ever been times when your need for love has been met? Let's talk about that. What has that looked like? What's it like for you to ask for love, for the expression of love that is meaningful to you? What's that like? Don't reinforce stories that continue to keep a person stuck in the story, and where it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's very, you have to be very gentle about it, and you go at a good pace. When I say good, like an even, go at the pace of life for something like that. Yeah. I'm just going to go to the question that I just popped up. Hi, Rachelle. I have important people in my life that completely shut down when engaging with feelings. Hanging up the phone. Okay. Are there strategies that can be employed in such instances? It makes it really difficult to find momentum with them. Yeah. Yeah, that's very difficult. And people have many ways of shutting down. Imagining that there will be the next time that you see that person, you can ask them, I'm just curious to know, and you can tell me this is an okay time to talk about it, but I really want to know what goes on for you in those moments when you're, like when you hung up the phone. I'm guessing you did it for a good reason. It's really good if you can say that. Okay, what's the good reason? They're meeting a need. What would the need be? It might be this. Hey, you're going into a territory that I know you are interested in talking about these things. I don't share your enthusiasm, because you're asking me to go into a scary territory. I don't want to be vulnerable. It's just too painful for me, and I haven't developed the skillfulness and the resources to be able to engage in a way that I feel some level of competency in, where I think we'll be able to really care for this relationship. And in that sense, the person might even say, trust me when I say me hanging up is me better than continuing the conversation based on how poorly resourced I am. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but it's okay. It's just to recognize, people are doing the best they can, and sometimes their best is a best that we might have had 10 years ago, and we've continued to work on ourselves or continue to expand or develop our capacity for challenging conversations. Not everybody shares that delight. I'll put it that way. Yeah.
Rachelle, we have
Yes.
some questions from previously in the chat as well. Did you want to
Okay.
now or keep going into?
No, let's go with the question. So I just did want to, I'm just wrapping up on that, the feelings. So do as much as you can to actually share how you feel, and then quickly connect it to what the need is. And I'm going to just say, like, how many people are on this call right now? 100 and some?
148.
Okay, here's the promise I'm asking you to make to yourself. You're never going to use those words again. The ones that are in the list B, which is an extensive list. Now, when you leave this call, probably by the end of today, you will have had encounters with people who have used these words. And here, I'm just going to give you a little piece of advice right now. Here's what not to say when they use it. Hey, that's not a feeling. Hey, I learned that earlier today. So unless you have an agreement and you print off the sheet and you decide, I'm going to work with this sheet of paper of feelings and needs, and let's see what we can do with this. Because I think we deserve more. I think our relationship has more, can carry more, can be more enriching for both of us. So that would be what I would encourage you to do. But when other people use this language and someone says, I feel disrespected, really pay attention to what's going on inside of you. And in that moment, you can actually monitor. Just notice the trigger reaction, right? Notice that going off. And one of the things you can just do is say, Okay, it sounds like you have a need for respect that's not being met right now, and you're feeling some frustration. Is that what's going on for you? That's the empathic response to what's happening for them. You can try that. Just see where it goes. For any of these words, they point directly to an unmet need. I could say that's the beauty of the language, even though it tends to be unproductive. Someone says they feel betrayed, you can guess pretty much they have a need for trust. You've lost trust. If it's about your relationship, you've lost trust in our relationship. That's what I'm hearing you say. Yeah, you're darn right. When you embezzle money, when you have an affair, when you don't follow through on what you say you're going to do. Okay, so these are the things that lead to loss of trust. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, yeah, I know I'm definitely going to be looking at this list carefully, so I really appreciated that. So, we have a question from Janine who asks, does identifying common values help with this process?
Yes, it does. I mean, I'm not sure. I would say very often needs and values, they're interchangeable. I mean, you could say that you value trust, and trust is also a need. But there are also things that a person might value that are not necessarily needs. But this needs language can help you get clear on what it is you share with another person in terms of values, especially in a close relationship. Yeah. Does that answer? I can ask whoever asked the question.
Janine, does that answer your question? I know it was from a while ago, so maybe
Okay.
referring to something specific. I think actually we may have lost Janine. So,
Okay. All right. Well, that's my answer anyway, but that needs and values are often interchangeable. Yeah.
So, the next thing here is a comment, but I think it's very relevant, and I wonder, Rachelle, if you'd want to respond. So the comment is that this is such a good reminder that colonial communications are so top down, and no one's needs matter as long as the leader or organization's reputation is maintained. Like no one else has needs that deserve recognition, and I think just kind of I'd love to hear your comments about colonialization and how it kind of relates to what you're saying and this person's comment.
It's such a big conversation, such an important topic. I would like to devote a lot more time to it. It's something that I'm constantly doing my best to track. There's a book I recommend, Columbus and Other Cannibals by Jack Forbes. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but it's about a way of proceeding, which essentially is exploitation. And does this exist in organizations? I would say absolutely. Institutions, organizations. So it's really troubling. And one of the things that I recommend people do, or what I think is one of the most important things that a person can be tracking right now and doing for themselves, do everything you can to maintain your own sense of sanity in a world where reality is now questionable. And like, what is really important? And we have so easily lost connection with the natural world. That particular connection is what sustains us. Whether we recognize it or not, the food on our plate, what is the connection between the food on your plate? How did it get there? Trace the line. If you're fortunate enough to have gotten it from your backyard, or you still have a connection to people who have, small farming, all of that kind of stuff is, to me, is the revolution, is to come back to planet Earth. And that requires a humility. And the etymology of the word humility, it comes from the humus, which is literally means ground. To be grounded, to have our feet on the earth and really pay attention. Where does everything come from? Where does my life come from? And to whom do I owe my gratitudes? And these gratitudes, typically you're going to trace a line that's ancestral and goes to earth, goes to ancestry. That's where our life comes from. And to be thanking life ongoingly. Marshall Rosenberg used to say, I believe if we truly master this process, we'd be crying 24 hours a day, half the time out of joy, half the time out of sorrow. I have a feeling that ratio might be different now because there's so much, there's just so much disconnection. And it's heartbreaking. So a lot of the work I do has to do with mourning and heartbreak and finding ways to reconnect to what's alive so that you can, in the words of Mary Oliver, be in touch with the soft animal of your body. Now I've said a lot of things and I have no idea how this is landing for the person who asked about colonialism but I see this as all part of it. It's all intertwined. How do we get people to take our orders and be convinced that what they're doing is for their own good? Okay, that's a very distorted and twisted way of thinking. So, and it's one I don't encourage, but to recognize that we're on the receiving end of that way. There's so little in our world that we benefit from that hasn't come to us by way of exploitation. And in that sense, deep heartbreak is appropriate. Yeah. There's here, just let me see if I can I often share quotes, but here's a quote from a writer, D.H. Lawrence, where he said, "Oh, what a catastrophe. What a maiming of love when it was made a merely personal feeling, taken away from the rising and setting of the sun and cut off from the magic connection of the solstice and equinox. This is what is the matter with us. We are bleeding at the roots because we are cut off from the earth and sun and stars, and love is a gritting mockery because, poor blossom, we plucked it from its stem on the tree of life and expected it to keep on blooming in our civilized vase on the table." So this to me is all connected to colonialism. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachelle. Would you mind repeating the title of the book you mentioned at the beginning? I just thought I could post a link for folks. And
Yeah.
I missed the exact.
Just 1 second. I'm just gonna pick it up.
Oh.
Get on the floor here. It's not a fun read, by the way. I don't usually read fun things, but there it is. Columbus and Other Cannibals. And I don't think it's that easy to get, by Jack Forbes. And Jack Forbes is a professor emeritus and former chair of Native American Studies at the University of California. So this is it's a gruesome look at many things that have happened. Yeah. Oh, there's a copy of the book on the Internet Archive. Okay, great. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, thank you. And so we have a couple more questions. One person asked about the long list B of feelings and needs. That's the second handout that you shared with us, right? It's a separate handout?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, I will share both of those handouts again one more time before the call in case folks didn't have a chance to download them. And then we have a question from Mona who asks, so if you are feeling disrespected, should you say I have a need for being respected instead?
Yes, I would say how I'm feeling. So in the NVC, it would be when you do or when you say what you just said, I feel hurt. I'm just going to imagine what the possible feelings are. There could be many things that you feel, right? Confusion, hurt, bewildered. If you feel angry and you feel other feelings as well, which usually we do, I would encourage you to start with the other feelings. Lead with those. So I feel confused, I feel bewildered, I have a need for respect. And I want to make sure I'm being clear and that you don't hear what I'm saying as a criticism. But I do want to know, what are you hearing me say right now? Okay, that's that in a request. Oftentimes we would ask the following: how do you feel about what I've just said? What comes up for you after what I've just said? And also, can you tell me what you're hearing me say? How do you know if message sent is message received? You have to ask this question. And so often people will not enjoy that question because usually they've heard it before and it sounds like this. What, just you tell me right now, what did you just hear me say? It's coming from a superior to, a teacher to a child, because we're assuming that there's an incapacity for the person to hear. But I do assure you that most people will distort what we say. By the time it gets to someone's ears, it's traveled such a short distance, right? A few feet. And so much distortion can take place in that. So we do want to really stress, look, there can be so much messiness between us. And I want to make sure that we can be on the track of being in a good place with each other. So I'm asking you, what are you hearing me say right now? And it's possible I'm not being clear in what I'm saying. So that's how I would word it. I've said a lot of things there, but the short version is, yeah, I have a need for respect, and I know you do too. You could say mutual respect between us. I really cherish that, and I'm not feeling it right now. Okay. So I'm giving you some different ways of saying it. Get creative. Yeah, get creative.
Thank you. It's 11:27, so
Yeah,
to wrap
yeah.
up. Rachelle, did you have any closing words? I don't see any more questions, so I think that we're good for questions. So, yeah, why don't you say anything you want, and then I can wrap up the session.
Okay, it's such a short period of time, and I really appreciate your questions and the comments that I've read, and I will just read a short poem to you because it's a very moving one, and it's called "If You Knew" by Ellen Bass. What if you knew you'd be the last to touch someone? If you were taking tickets, for example, at the theater, tearing them, giving back the ragged stubs, you might take care to touch that palm, brush your fingertips along the lifeline's crease. When a man pulls his wheeled suitcase too slowly through the airport, when the car in front of me doesn't signal, when the clerk at the pharmacy won't say thank you, I don't remember, they're going to die. A friend told me she'd been with her aunt. They just had lunch and the waiter, a young gay man with plum black eyes, joked as he served the coffee, kissed her aunt's powdered cheek when they left. Then they walked half a block and her aunt dropped dead on the sidewalk. How close does the dragon's spume have to come? How wide does the crack in heaven have to split? What would people look like if we could see them as they are, soaked in honey, stung and swollen, reckless, pinned against time? What would people look like if we could see them as they are, soaked in honey, stung and swollen, reckless, pinned against time? So that's the kind of mess we're in, isn't it? And I think it's probably in a way always been that way. We are mortal creatures. We have hearts, we have longings, we have dreams, and we're also living in a world that has its own way of dreaming. And so I'm so grateful to be able to share this with you. I hope it's touched you and been meaningful in some way. And there's lots on nonviolent communication. You can, especially I encourage you to look at nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg. His workshops are still available on YouTube for free.